Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight we are talking avoiding the sophomore slump. The panel's here. Hey, let's just do
Talking bands no one talks about. Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome the panel. We have a great topic tonight. Tonight we have Paul, we have Todd, we have Eric here tonight, and our topic, we're going to talk about those albums that avoided the sophomore slump. Now, if anybody knows what a sophomore slump is, we can give you a brief introduction to what that is. But what I've had the panel do was go through and pick albums that were definitely albums that avoided this sophomore slump. So let me give you an example of the sophomore slump. And a good one is Meatloaf. Bat Out of Hell came out in 1977, sold more than 43 million copies. Now, he had some vocal problems, drug issues, whatever. There's problems. Dead Ringer was the follow-up record, and it didn't come out to 1981. Now, this record did not resonate with the public. I don't think it sold very well. It had a duet with Cher on it, for God's sakes. And this record didn't do anything. That's a good example of the sophomore slump. I mean, technically, you have a big record like Bat Out of Hell. You would have thought that this follow-up would have sold billions. Now, the other one we were talking about before we recorded, and I want to talk about one that isn't mentioned all the time, but I do remember this being a problem or a sophomore record with issues, was Pretenders 2. Because you had that first record that came out in 1980, one of my all-time favorite records. It's a perfect record. There are no tracks in there that are weak. Everything is top-notch. Pretenders 2 comes out in 1981, and it's no first album.
Yeah, Pretenders 2 is one of those ones, though, that's weird because there are one or two really good tracks, like upper echelon Pretenders songs.
Talk of the Town,
but yeah,
Message of Love. But
yeah, but the album kind of goes like this. Whereas the first one is, so that one's complicated. So it's like they are getting better, but they're also not. They're not.
Well, it still had Chris Thomas producing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Pretenders Part 2 because it sounds the same, but the songs aren't quite there. And the record company pressured them for, we need to have something. Which is a problem.
It makes you wonder how many times it is actually 100% the record company's fault.
Eric went into outer space.
He'll be back.
Continue on, ladies and gentlemen. He will be back, I'm sure. But they put out an EP because prior to Pretenders 2 coming out, they were, like I said, they were pressured by the record company. We need something. So they had Talk of the Town, Message of Love, and then they pulled some like B-sides of like some singles. But by the time Pretenders 2 came out, we already had the two best songs off that record. And it kind of took away from Pretenders 2. So it falls within that sophomore slump thing. Though, don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen, I like Pretenders 2. I'll take it over anything else in the catalog other than the first album. Okay.
Yeah.
But we're just talking about those sophomore releases. So now you know what it is to have a sophomore album, though a lot of you probably watching this show already knew, but it's good discussion. So we are talking about those records that did bands or artists that didn't have a sophomore slump. So today we've got, there's Eric, he's back. We'll get to him in a second, but I'm going to turn it over to Todd for his first pick. So Todd, what is a record? Give me a band or artist that did not have a sophomore slump.
All right. Well, this one's pretty obvious, but this is a band that had a really good run for a really long time. This is Chicago 2, or just Chicago, as it is officially on the spine there. And, Chicago debuted with this. Doesn't get much better than this, Chicago Transit Authority. And so actually, I'm going to switch to the CD because it's a little easier to hold. Yeah. So Chicago 2 has this thing on side 2 of the record called Ballet for a Girl in Buchanan. And it's a how many songs are in this thing? 6 through 18, like 12 song. No, sorry, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 songs, 7 songs. And within it, there is "Make Me Smile," "Color My World," within that little medley. And then there's also 25 or 6 to 4. There's also this thing called "It Better End Soon," which is this political song by Terry Kath that has some of the best guitar solos I've ever heard in my life in it. And side one is really strong too. "Moving in the Road," "Home for the People," "In the Country." So, this was a pretty strong record. Some people might say that it's flawed because it doesn't have very good engineering. Something went wrong it's been remastered a couple of times, and Steven Wilson is the one who's gotten the closest to actually fixing it. But a super strong album, bunch of hit singles, 25 or 6 to 4 for crying out loud. Speaking of really good guitar solos.
Yeah.
So I think Chicago 2 or just Chicago is that's my first example.
But I mean, compared to the first album, I mean, it also got good reviews and it sold
It
well.
did. It got good reviews and it sold well. Yeah.
Because
it had legs. It was popular for many, many years after it came out.
Even with that, the sound quality issues, because I've had the original, like the Columbia CD, like was made in Japan, and it was basically just off of whatever tape. Boy, it's a muddy mess, but the songs still hold up,
Yeah.
and it still sold well.
It's so good that it overcomes that. I've got a 2i Columbia on vinyl.
I've got a 2i.
I got that hoping it would sound better, and it doesn't. It sounds the same. It sounds like all the rest of them. But
yeah, there you go.
Still a great album.
All right. So there you go. Chicago 2, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
It did avoid the sophomore slump. Let's throw it over to Eric. Eric, what's your first choice?
Great choice there, Todd.
Thanks.
So my first choice is I'm going the genre of heavy metal. 1985, Savatage, "Power of the Night."
Oh.
So the first album was actually recorded in '83 called Sirens. And when they recorded that, there was an EP that was released shortly after. So they recorded, it was called Dungeons Are Calling. So they recorded all that material that was originally supposed to be on Sirens. But as Todd will tell you, back in the day, vinyl only had so much space for recording. So they put out the Dungeons Are Calling EP shortly after. I think it was like 5 or 6 songs, and then Metal Blade much later re-released it. But this was a band that for any of the classic Savatage albums, Sirens is often held up pretty well and often regarded as one of their best in their early catalog. This one here, they got producer Max Norman on, who everybody knows. Who hasn't he done with Ozzy Osbourne, Y&T, Megadeth, all of them. And this one here, the production and the songs, you had Keith Collins on bass at the time. This was their last album with him. Steve Wackles on drums, and of course you had the Oliva brothers, John on lead vocals, and the late great Chris Oliva. And what Max Norman came up with Chris' guitar tone. Back in the day, he was a riff meister, or master, I should say, along with his technical ability. And on this record, he just absolutely shines. All the songs are better. The production is great. This was a time. This wasn't the album I got into with the band, but early on, 7th, 8th grade, freshman year, all the popular songs I knew from Metallica and Iron Maiden, that opened the door to heavy metal. These guys kicked the door off the hinges for me, and they still remain my favorite heavy metal band of all time. For the classic albums, I recommend this one. As much as I love Sirens, the songs are better. It also shows the next album, which is kind of not looked on in great regard for the fans, but it shows the commercial appeal on a couple of the tracks, like In the Dream and Heart for Love. But the title track, Warriors, Skull Session, crushing. Great power metal. Love it. So this one definitely beats the Sophomore Slump, as good as the album before it came.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Awesome. Excellent choice. All right. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. All right, Paul, let's throw it over to you. What do you got? What's your
All right.
pick?
So my first one is the only one I can't afford on vinyl, so I have no props. So I've got my notes, and you'll see me doing the Wayne's World Camera 1, Camera 2 thing, just to make sure I get all my facts out there. But in 1982, Queensryche released their EP. Now, the EP is going to come up a lot with all my picks, and even either honorable mentions, or if we do another one of these. EPs seem to be something that really help a band avoid a sophomore slump, I've noticed. So they start with the EP. With The Warning, their first official full album, comes out in 1984. You've got James Guthrie as your producer, so his work on The Wall, he was mixer and co-producer. They brought in Michael Kamen, he did the strings on Roads to Madness, which was huge. And they had that Judas Priest Iron Maiden sound to them, feel to them, influence to them. So 1986 rolls around, and we've got Rage for Order, their second album, their sophomore album. More of everything. They improved on. They got rid of what they didn't need, and they focused on who they were. They started coming into themselves. You got the socio-political themes of the album, produced by Neil Kernan, who's worked with Yes, Queen, Supertramp, Linda Ronstadt. Important because he knows how to do vocals. That's a big deal when it comes to Queensryche, obviously with Jeff Tate. And you've got that excellent vocal mix between Chris DeGarmo and Jeff Tate. These people knew how to put them on there. There were 3 engineers on Rage for Order, but the one that jumped out at me was Dave Ogilvy, because he also worked with Queen, David Bowie, Skinny Puppy. So a little bit of a punk thing. So now you know how to channel that rage, that anger that they're putting out there, made all the songs stronger. Nothing against The Warning, but Rage for Order is so much more focused of an album. They had 3 singles off it. Gonna Get Close to You, which was a Del Bello cover. So a lot of Canadian influence on this album, by the way, worth noting, between the music and the production staff and engineering staff. Second single was The Whisper with I Dream in Infrared as the B-side. Third one, Walk in the Shadows. Walk in the Shadows was the song for a while off this album. It wasn't the video that did. Gonna Get Close to You's video got decent rotation on Headbangers Ball, but Walk in the Shadows has been a live staple for Queensryche ever since. Both iterations, I might add, because Eric's going to see him tomorrow night, and they're playing here in my town as we speak. They're doing a tour where they're doing the EP and The Warning all the way through. But I'm a big Rage fan, so I'd rather be here talking with you about it than at that show, if that says something. Rage for Order, exactly. Rage for Order, less Judas Priest feel, tighter sound, a little bit more proggy, and the record company did say we want to put glam look on this, which the band was not crazy about. They've talked about in interviews, but they did it, and it did work. It helped them sell. So what made them avoid the sophomore slump, which is what I tried to focus on my picks, some things I've already covered. The DeGarmo, Tate writing and vocals, infinitely. Just they never slowed down in this part of the era, where they were definitely on the ascent. You've got Michael Wilton and Chris DeGarmo chemistry on guitars. Unbelievable. I know we're not taking it further than the second album, but when you do look to where they went, you could tell the trajectory was definitely going up there. Eddie Jackson and Scott Rockenfield on bass and drums. You've got tight, reliable bass playing, intelligent bass playing from Eddie Jackson. Rockenfield was a composer as far as being a drummer. He was a compositional drummer where he was always in the right place at the right time, and the guy's like a metronome. He can keep time perfectly. So, and then as far as staples on the album that I haven't mentioned, New Regal still makes both Jeff Tate and Queensryche's set lists. I Dream in Infrared. I Will Remember Killing Words. I Will Remember and Killing Words both got play on MTV Unplugged after Empire made it big. So this is an album that they keep going back to because they know the fans love it. So it was just more of all the right things. So that's my spiel for Rage for Order.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent work. Yeah, well, you know that I saw Queensryche in 86, right? Yeah. Did you see him back in the day, Paul?
Mindcrime was the first time I saw him. So,
all right. Well, they were good then.
I had friends who were into them. I just should throw my shout outs to Jim, Barb, and Karen Shields for getting me, and Sam Marcillo for getting me into Queensryche. I got shout outs for each of these 3 because they were all influenced by other people. So,
awesome.
Yeah. I was around for that, but became a diehard around Rage into Mindcrime.
All right. Awesome. Excellent choice. Excellent choice. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go into a time machine. Well, in a similar era that Paul has chosen, But I'm going to go with a band that their second album pretty much sealed their, how do I want to put it? It kind of sealed them because the first album, not too bad, a lot of great tracks, but the second album was the defining moment for this band. And I remember when I heard this record back in the day when I was a wee boy, teenager, young teen, and I heard one of the first singles off this record, and it just opened up I just couldn't believe that anything like this was out. Now, we're not talking Queensryche, and we're not talking Savatage. God knows we're not talking Chicago. We are going to be talking Duran Duran. So Rio came out May 10th, 1982. Critics absolutely declared this record to be their finest work. And when I got it back in the day, I totally got the whole thing. In fact, that's how everybody pretty much got into them because, after Rio, then you kind of went back and discovered what they had. But initially, the record sold really well in the United States, but I mean, in the UK. But in USA, it really didn't do anything. They ended up David Kirschenbaum went and remixed several tracks. Actually, depending on what version you've got, it could be all a side one. And
there's like 7 different versions.
There's a whole bunch of
different lot of versions.
Yeah. The first CD version of it, if you ever see the original EMI CD back in the day, that does have the original mix of the record. I know they put out, well, I do have it, a deluxe edition where they have the original mix of the record and they have the mixes for the US album. Now I'm going to go back. Do you remember? I don't know, Todd, you might remember this. When they did the Rio for the domestic CD, the original CD, did that have just the UK mix? I don't think that the US mix ever came out until much later on CD.
I'm not sure. There used to be a web page, and it might still be out there, that actually documents this in great detail with what the catalog numbers are and the dead wax numbers and everything, and how you can tell what you've got.
Mm-hmm.
I was always under the impression that the original Capitol CD does have some songs on side one that are messed with.
It might,
but I'm not sure. Luckily, nobody ever touched side 2. To my recollection. So
I don't have a problem with the remix. I mean, that's really where I came into it. But I don't know. It sounds a bit slicker, I guess. I was reading online, you know what the goal was with that remix was to make Duran Duran sound like Van Halen played through like a car stereo.
And you know what's funny about that? First off, they couldn't have picked a better engineer than David Kirschenbaum. He's one of the best producer engineers of all time.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it does. I think that the changes are subtle. They don't really jump out at me. I've got an original
is that a hard
Electrola copy of this record.
Look at
this is actually my wife's.
Wow.
And so I'm real happy to have that because it's not messed with. But I've never really thought that there was anything about what Kirschenbaum did to them that made me mad or ruined it or anything.
It didn't ruin it for me. I mean, I liked it that they used the night version of Hungry Like a Wolf as opposed, now we're talking Duran Duran, as opposed to the UK version, which had the shortened version. I like the night version. But the UK album, the first Duran Duran album, got up to number 2 in the UK, and it got to number 6 in the United States. No, I'm reading that wrong. God, idiot. The first Duran Duran album, 1981, got to number 3 in the UK and number 10 in the US. Rio fared better, not by much in the UK. It got to number 2, but in Billboard, it got up to number 6.
Yeah.
But, after all this amount of time that's passed, it's still considered their peak.
Yep.
It's like Duran Duran's like a short bell curve. They improved, and then Seven and the Rage Tiger's not an improvement. I do like that record, but then everything else since then's not been quite what they were hoping. But a lot of these bands cannot produce content. They do that one great record, I mean, Rio's a perfect record, just like Pretenders 1. Perfect record. And not everybody can sustain that. The Beatles sustained it, but not very many people can do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my choice for an album that avoided the sophomore slump. All right, Todd, what you got? What's your next one?
All right. Well, I don't think anybody is going to disagree with this. Robert Plant, The Principle of Moments.
Oh,
Now,
no, right.
some people might say that I shouldn't pick it because this is, this was not the first time the world heard Robert Plant.
Right.
So,
But it's a solo
that's
record,
something we all
though.
know.
Solo,
But if
big
we're
difference.
talking,
Right.
technically, his solo records, I think this is awfully good. I don't get me started on Moonlight and Samosa. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. I could talk about it for an hour. But this record right here, so the first record, you had two drummers. You had Phil Collins and you had Cozy Powell. So yay, great.
Hey, hit it out of
This
the
album,
park.
you've got Phil Collins on almost all of it, except for a couple songs where you have Barrymore Barlow from Jethro Tull. So also great. His band was fantastic. Guitarist Robbie Blunt. I absolutely love that guy. This was let's see, In the Mood, Big Log are the songs that everybody knows, but the whole album is great. It's an 8-song album, about 40 minutes. I think Martin Popoff has said that it's certain periods in his life that he's called this his favorite album of all time. It's one of the classiest, most elegant albums you're ever going to hear. Incredibly well engineered. And I like to call this the pleated pants era of Robert Plant, and it's my favorite era. Where he turned into this gentleman, all dressed up, and I just love that he went from shirtless in The Song Remains the Same to this. It's just great. I mean,
Boy.
the guy has continuously reinvented himself, but I'm not here to gush about Robert Plant too much, but definitely he avoided it on this one.
Well,
Big
ladies
Log's
and
one of my favorite songs of all time.
it's a
What's
great.
that?
It's a
It's a good
Big Log.
great record.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're picking a lot from the early '80s, and believe me, we did
It's
not.
a good time.
We did not share what we were picking. We're just kind of letting it loose. So there you go. The '80s was a good time. You're exactly right.
And I'm a little hazy. Did the Honey Drippers come after that, or was it around that time?
After
Yes.
Okay.
wasn't that like 85, 86?
Yeah, I was gonna say more mid. Okay.
Yeah, and I saw that. I could be wrong about this. I could have seen the Shaken and Stirred tour, but I'm pretty sure I saw the Principle of Moments tour, and they had like an intermission, and they came back out as the Honey Drippers,
Nice.
and then there was another break, and they came back out as, Robert Plant. His band.
Very
It was
cool.
pretty
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Man,
And
I
they had
didn't
like
know
a big neon sign, and the band had like those little like music stand like big bands do. It was
Yeah.
very cool.
you were lucky to see that show.
I was.
Wow.
Todd's seen a lot of great shows, ladies and gentlemen.
I used to
Stories
work at a
you can
record
tell.
store, and we also sold tickets, so I had a little bit of an advantage.
Man, that was the best. That's the best era. All right. Thank you, Todd. Let's throw it over to Mr. Simon. Mr. Simon, what's your next one?
All right, my second pick. I'm going to take us out of the 80s then.
Wait a minute. Did I skip Eric?
Oh,
Eric, you skipped Eric.
yeah.
Eric got out of sorry, Eric. No, when you
My
left
internet
and
problem.
came back in, it screwed up my order on my screen. So,
Threw me
Eric,
off too. Go
sorry,
Eric.
Paul. No offense.
None taken.
Eric, sorry. What's your second pick? Sorry. Golly.
So my second pick, still sticking kind of with like the hard rock, going with 1985, a band that I have loved forever. Stryper, Soldiers Under Command. Interesting about this band, they used to be called Rock's Regime, and right before they did their first album, EP, Yellow and Black Attack, they changed to Stryper. Interesting tidbit, there were two guitarists that tried out for the band that almost became a member before Oz Fox. One of them was C.C. DeVille from Poison,
Yeah.
and the other one was Doug Aldrich, who went on to be with his band Lion, and then later Whitesnake. Interesting where Stryper would have gone if either of those guys would have. But
Yeah.
both Robert and Michael Sweet have often said that Yellow and Black Attack is like their first album, but over the years it's like, oh, was it an EP? I'm going with the first album. And when that was recorded, it was like a lot of those early 80s, Quiet Riot, Twisted Sister, very raw sounding, almost like bootleg. And then they got Michael Wagner to produce this one. And they're one of those bands that right away established their sound. Vocals, they had a twin guitar attack with Michael Sweet and Oz Fox and the pounding rhythm section. And this album it's aggressive, it's heavy, it's got catchy songs. Every Stryper album's got a ballad or two. I actually like both of them on here. And it's funny, I was into Styx, we've talked about on the show. I've always thought Michael Sweet had a Dennis DeYoung tone to his voice. That's just me, and a voice that has actually held up really well for anybody who hasn't really listened to these guys, because the next two albums really were more commercially accessible, To Hell with the Devil and In God We Trust, and they were MTV darlings. But if anybody who has not paid attention to them in the past, since the 80s, their last 5 albums when they got back together in 2003 has been some of the best of their career. And it speaks to, outside of having a couple of different bass players come through the band, it's been the same 3 guys, Michael, Robert Sweet, Oz Fox. And there's not too many bands from that era that have stayed together. Tesla comes to mind, Winger. They're putting, for a band long in the tooth like them, take away the yellow. Here's my personal opinion with this band. Take away the gimmick of the Yellow and Black Attack. Take away the religious lyrics, which not every song is religious. This is one of the more consistently best hard rock bands of the past 30 years. My humble opinion, and maybe a little biased, but considering all their contemporaries from that era, yeah, I just love these guys. But this one here, they went to the moon in popularity from here on out and into the 80s at least. But yeah, Soldiers Under Command, my second pick.
Good pick. I've got In God We Trust on vinyl that I bought for, well, 50 cents.
That was very overproduced, and the band will tell you, so slickly overproduced. But there's good songs hidden in there.
But it's mint. It's mint.
It is.
I got it for 50 cents. I should have pulled it. I didn't know you were going to pull any Stryper. I would have pulled it. I've done a show where I pull out all those metal records that I bought when they were giving them away. I've done a show on those before, but it got good reviews. It got like 3. Oh, yeah, it's okay. It got decent reviews.
Yeah,
but nothing like that record that you're talking about.
No.
Yeah. But do you think Stryper's one of those bands? How do you look at their whole career as far as their whole catalog?
They broke up in 92, 93. Michael Sweet put out a bunch of solo albums, and he's actually played with, he did a couple albums with George Lynch, Sweet and Lynch. He's guest vocal and guitar on a few different albums. They got back together in 2003, and really, it's crazy. As much as I like that 80s stuff, these last 5, I want to say 6 albums have just been outstanding. Very consistent band.
I thought I had another record, and I do. And I had to go backwards because I know I have 2 Stryper albums, but I've got To Hell with the Devil. Say it really fast. To Hell with the Devil, but I've got the alternative cover. I don't have the cover that's got like, I don't know.
Angels.
I don't have that one. I've got the black one.
I got that one on vinyl. Yeah.
That got a lot better review than the other album that In God We Trust.
Oh yeah, that one is to me my favorite album from them. It's just top to bottom.
So it must have been reissued. It looks like it came out on Enigma, but
yeah.
Evidently it could have been. Where would that? Okay, you got Soldiers Under. Okay, so that would be like their 3rd record.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that doesn't count. I'm thinking that probably what they did was redesign that album cover, probably because that album wasn't doing anything. They slapped that other cover on. I don't know. Do you know the story behind
the story behind that is it was too controversial.
Oh, okay.
Because it was 4 angels putting the devil, dragging them back down to hell with the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the distributors like, yeah, let's not do that. Let's just put To Hell with the Devil, the text on there. And so for a while it became hard to find, and then the band reissued it back in the early 2000s. So yeah.
All right, cool. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Stryper. That's a good choice. Let's throw it over to. Sorry, Paul. I didn't.
Oh,
All good.
We're gonna blame Eric on this for dropping out and screwing up my screen. Anyway, Paul, what's your next choice?
All right, I'm going to drag us kicking and screaming out of the 80s and bring us into the 90s for my next one. So I had a chance to see this band 2 months before they hit it big. They were touring, I think, with Soul Asylum, played U of I when I was a freshman in college. I wanted to see Soul Asylum because I was a diehard from theirs by then, even before they broke. And I went, no, I don't recognize that band. Nah, I don't need to go. I'll see them another time. Then 10 came out in 1991. And I've never forgiven myself for that. So you've got Eddie Vedder, Mike McCready, Stone Gossard, Jeff Ament, and Dave Cruzen on drums. And 10 explodes. So talk about a strong debut. And yes, you could use the G word and just say they didn't follow any movement. They led where they were at because they weren't just the 3-chord. No offense to any other bands that people might be pulling out of that, but they weren't just 3-chord players and all that. You had the intertwined Mike and Stone playing amazing. You got producer Rick Parshar. He knew their sound from Temple of the Dog, so he was aware of it, and he knew how to make them sound great. That being said, and you had that Hendrix Zeppelin feel to it a little bit, so you had classic rock sensibilities, but with this newer sound and this more introspective songwriting. Then, in between albums, it's worth noting MTV Unplugged, that hit big. And then Dave Cruzen left, and Dave Aprizes came in for drums. Very, very, very important to their sound. So now we got Versus, originally called 5 Against 1, came out in 93. Brendan O'Brien produced it. So look at that pedigree. You've got engineering on Black Crow, Shake Your Moneymaker. You've got Core from Stone Temple Pilots. You've got Soundgarden, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. The guy knows how to record.
100% Fun, Matthew Sweet.
Exactly.
Blue Sky on Mars, Matthew Sweet.
I was waiting to see if you would mention that, Grant.
Can't help
Jump
it,
in at
Todd.
any
I
time,
can't help
guys.
it.
Seriously.
Yep.
So this is an original and unopened copy of Versus, $9.99 at Record Swap. So
Wait a minute, you bought that at night for $9.99 at a record swap recently?
Yep. No. This is when it came out.
Oh, Record Swap's a store?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, it was an actual store.
Okay, I didn't know. I thought you were at a, convention.
Do you have one you can listen to?
I do
you
not.
have another one?
I'm not going
I
to
had
open
it. I had a copy of Versus when it came out, and what Vitology when it came out. I then ended up trading them in, but I had them when they came out.
I traded in my Vitology because I wasn't crazy about it. But so their way, they didn't do the EP route as I mentioned before, but tons of B-sides, lots of exposure, Saturday Night Live, and very important, the single soundtrack. So these guys knew what they're doing. MTV Unplugged. They just consistently worked. So by the time we get to Versus, what we end up with is, as opposed to when I was talking about Queensryche becoming more polished, and my third band I'm actually going to say got more polished, I think Pearl Jam did the opposite. And before I forget, big shout out to Lou Alessandrini, the biggest Pearl Jam fan on the planet. Also, what finally did get to go see them last September at United Center in Chicago, and they opened with, of all songs off of this, Elderly Woman Behind the Counter in a Small Town. Now that's how you open a show, not the big thunders, whatever.
Right.
It was just a steady ramp. The first 4 songs were but mellow, the crowd gets into it, and then they punched in. I think the 5th song was Why Go, and the place went up like a bar fight. It was amazing. But back to Versus. So this is the only album I'm going to do song by song, but I will fly through it. It wasn't an advanced single. You got to remember, they were ditching the idea of singles. They had the whole Ticketmaster thing going on. So they basically, where 10 had found its strengths commercially based on singles, and the band wasn't crazy about that, they did the opposite with Versus. Animal was the first song we heard, and we were all dying for new music because between all the B-sides and Unplugged and all that, then you hear Animal at the 1993 Video Music Awards. The place went nuts, and then who comes walking out after they do Animal? Neil Young, and they do Rockin' in the Free World. So by then the train was rolling and there was no stopping it. So you go down the track list, and Versus parallels with 10 nicely, but I don't want to sound like I'm slamming 10 because I'm definitely not, but you can tell songs that have the same feel or written on the same thing, kind of the same vein musically, not lyrically, but they open with Go, which opens like once off 10, strong opener. Animal, which has an even flow feel to it, just that rage. It's the way I kind of described it was it's classic rock meets punk energy. Because it's just off, it's raw. This Versus is a more raw album, and it's all the better for it. Daughter, which could have turned into another single like Jeremy, and it didn't. No video, done on purpose. Glorified G, Dissident, which has that alive feel to it almost. If you listen to them back to back, you kind of catch that. WMA, Blood is a punk song. There's no getting around that, and it's amazing. Reminds me of when they used to do, and they've still pulled it out for some sets, Sonic Reducer from the Dead Boys. So it's just got that same raw feel to it. Rearview Mirror, actually my favorite Pearl Jam song of all time. All these songs keep coming up in their set lists even now. Rats, got that rhythm and funk feel to it. I already talked about Elderly Woman. Leash, that's got that same energy that Porch did. And Indifference, closing on an introspective, melancholy, mellow song. Now, Release is pretty untouchable, but that being said, Indifference, that was the song after I did my first listen through the album. Indifference was kind of like the after-album cigarette for me. It was like this. Now I need to take it all in. I've just gotten the living daylights beaten out of me, and now we close with Indifference. It's like, oh, this is good. Now let's start over again. So, and even the singles, actual CD singles, which I do have buried somewhere. I'm not going to try and dig them out. But Animal was the first song we heard, but it wasn't the first single. Go was the first single, CD-wise. Daughter was second. Animal was third. Dissidents was fourth. But there was no reliance on that. And don't forget, 1994, you had the Saturday Night Live appearance where they did Daughter in rehearsals, but when it came time to go to air, what do? Rearview Mirror, and then this was, if I've got my math right, 8 days after Kurt Cobain was found dead. And so they played Not For You, which would end up on Vitology. So always thinking ahead, looking ahead. They had 4 albums worth of material, but they picked the best to put on the Verses. So I can't say it's better than 10, but talk about avoiding a sophomore slump. Versus is a strong album to this day by far.
Well, Versus sold quite a bit too. Was it every bit as successful as 10 or more, or what? I don't have that data.
I'm look it curious. Up. That I didn't check. I know they've played every song live repeatedly. Lou actually sent me set lists that I did not have a chance to scurry into my notes, but when they did the 2 dates at the United Center, they split 10 and Versus songs between the 2 nights. And while I missed Rearview Mirror, I got a bunch of other good ones, so I'm happy.
Well, I do remember back in the day that the public, the Pearl Jam public or the record buying public took it all in. This was a welcome. It wasn't like this got bad reviews. Everybody held it in high praise. It was very successful. It totally qualifies for cheating the sophomore slump. Yeah. But I'm just curious before we go on, what did you not like about Vitology?
Maybe too raw for me, maybe a little less energy for me. I think I wanted to hear, and this is totally subjective. We're just talking. Yeah. I think I wanted a more refined sound, and that's not the direction they were going. So I didn't grow in the same way they did. I was so into the B-sides, and I don't know what they could have done that would have kept me on that same trajectory, because I had every B-side on cassette, I might add. Even had some of the I've got just off camera, I'll grab it. Why the hell not? I've got what I believe to be the first released 10. I was an original member of the 10 Club. So this is Angel, and then the B-side is Ramblings. So this is way, way back and way old.
Wow.
But this is how they built their base well. So
I'm just curious, but do you remember when Pearl Jam brought out that reissue where they remixed 10 and made it less slick because I don't think that the band were really into that sound. I'm not
They
sure
weren't happy with
who
it.
produced, who mixed that. Was it Andy Wallace? Sounds like Andy Wallace, who did Nirvana Nevermind, which could be yet another record.
Someone else would have to talk about Nirvana.
Yeah. But
Not my
yeah.
bag.
But did you ever hear the record where they totally remixed it and it wasn't so slick? I never heard it.
I did not. So
I'd like to hear it to see what they did.
Now you're
It is
costing
what
me
it is.
money.
There's no point in changing it. There's no
Todd,
point
did
in
you
changing
hear it when they remixed it?
No, I didn't hear it, but I don't like that idea.
Yeah, I don't like
that
revisionist.
That album made them, and it is what it is. And the idea of trying to get a little few extra cool points just by saying, "Oh, we wanted it to be less slick." I don't like that.
Well, it's like
Very
remixing.
few albums can withstand the remix well, but
Right.
you know.
Well,
Right.
that definitely helped it. Not by much, but it's a lot better. But it's like going back to the Beatles and remixing it for all these box sets and stuff. Do we really need to remix it?
But Paul, you mentioned your reaction to Vitology reminded me that when Vitology came out, I remember telling my girlfriend at the time, who became my first wife, I used to say, eventually Pearl Jam is just going to be Eddie Vedder standing at the microphone going, because
I'm not saying it's accurate, but that is sort of how
that's what Vitology sounded like to me.
The eye kind of does
It's
Vitology.
a solo album with his backing band.
You're going to get hate mail.
I'm going to
Am
get
I?
rocked. But let me say, I came back into the fold with No Code, with Yield,
I
and
had
then
No Code on
Backspacer
vinyl, too.
especially.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
Absolutely.
So before I get slaughtered,
But I had an original pressing of No Code when it came out, and I sold that damn thing. I think it was a 2-record set. Now try to find a No Code
right.
on vinyl.
Oh, yeah.
Original pressing. I was a dumbass. Of course, I'm still a dumbass, but nothing's changed. But I should have. I got rid of all that. I had all that original pressings of all of it. Oh, don't get me started. Anyway, there you go, Paul. Great choice.
That's a great pick, Paul.
Great pick. Me, I'm going to go back. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because there's probably, I don't know, people probably won't remember, but we're going to go back to the 60s and we're going to talk about the Jefferson Airplane. Jefferson Airplane takes off 1966. Signe Anderson was the first female vocalist and Skip Spence was the original drummer. Skip Spence went on to, he did a great solo album called Or, which went virtually unnoticed. I think he recorded that while he was in the insane asylum. And of course, he was also a member of Moby Grape. So he left the Airplane, went to Moby Grape. But the first Jefferson Airplane album didn't do anything, ladies and gentlemen. It got to 128 on the charts. So Signe left, Skip left, and then we've got Spencer Dryan and we got Grace Slick who joined the band. They do Surrealistic Pillow in 1967, and their history was made because it had White Rabbit, Somebody to Love. This went platinum. It got up to 36 on the U.S. album charts. It was big, 1967. This is one of those records that they look to for this totally defines the counterculture. It really starts with that whole hippiedom thing here. Right here, this is where it all happened. And it's a great record. What can I say? You know, it's
one of those records that defines record collecting.
It does.
It's like with the resurgence of vinyl, it's one of those albums that everybody feels like they have to have.
You do. And what's funny about this record is if you have the mono mix of this record and the stereo mix, they're like two different animals. They did bring it out on CD, the mono mix once, and then they keep, you know how they release things nowadays, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, the mono mix is very dry and the stereo mix is just lots of reverb. So it depends upon what you like. But it's still a classic. Like I said, very successful. Jefferson Airplane avoided that sophomore slump totally. So looking at time. Do we have enough time to go around one more time? Are you guys good or?
Yeah, we can. I can be pretty brief.
All
I
right.
can be brief on mine.
All right,
Yeah,
let's go
same.
around one more time and then we'll wrap this dog up. So far, a lot of great choices. And I know we've kept it kind of loose, but we're really here to talk music and to turn you on to stuff. So hopefully you might get turned on to these records if you haven't heard them. So we really would like for you to reach out and let us know in the comments your thoughts on these records if you're familiar with them. Anyway, let's do our quick round, our last round. I'm going to send it over to Todd Evans. Todd, what's your number 3?
All right. Well, I'm going to change it up a bit. I mean, we had a little discussion at the beginning of this show about Sophomore Slump is kind of a combination between a drop in sales and a drop in quality.
Yep.
So imagine, if you will, just for a minute, that for my next pick, we're going to forget about sales and we're just going to talk about quality.
Yes.
Wow.
ABC Beauty
I
Stab.
love that record, though.
Way to pull it out.
So what happens with this album? Okay, they record this.
Yep.
A lot of people think it's a masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece.
It's these poor guys that nobody knew working with Trevor Horn and these little bitty studios in the UK and just flying by the seat of their pants. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. And so they come up with this slick orchestrated thing. I mean, it makes the career of the orchestrator, Ann Dudley. It turns her into the most wanted person for doing string arrangements, and it makes Trevor Horn the most wanted person for doing for producing. So they come to do a follow-up. Trevor Horn's not available, so he says, "Okay, I'm going to give you my engineer, Gary Langan." So Gary Langan produces this. It's just I want to show you the picture of the inside of it. Think about all of the, Martin Fry and the videos and everything and what everybody looks like. Oh, you know what? The picture I'm looking for isn't in the. Oh, there it is. It's behind the CD. It's here. Looks like a working rock band, doesn't it? I mean, it's like so. What you get here is you get heavier. The drummer had moved on by this point, so they're a trio. So the drummer that they used was Andy Newmark, who's a rock drummer who's played on Pink Floyd records and a whole bunch of things. And so you've got these songs here that are just they just teeter on the edge of that slick production with the tuned percussion and the strings and stuff like that. But they got tons more guitar. They got a big, fat, heavy drum sound. And this thing rocked. It sounds like, if you've never heard it before, it sounds like a heavy version of Roxy Music. I mean, and it's like, who thought that that's what ABC would sound like?
It would be.
So,
sounds great.
Yeah, I'm going to pick ABC Beauty Stab. It didn't completely tank, but it definitely didn't live up to the sales of this one. But as far as quality goes, man, these guys stepped up. And anybody who was lucky enough to have actually heard this back then said, wow, what happened to ABC?
Well,
For
it's
better
not.
or for worse.
It
What
wasn't
happened
what
to them? I don't like it, or what happened to them? Oh my God, this is amazing.
it wasn't what the public
Right.
anticipated them hearing. It totally went against everything. But
Yeah.
if anybody knows anything about ABC back in the day did what they wanted to do, and that's the album they wanted to produce. So
Yeah, there's a song on here called "By Default, by Design." It's kind of a slow song. It's got a orchestral arrangement. That song gets stuck in my head 3 or 4 times a week. There's a song on here called "United Kingdom," which is a political song that basically predicts what happens to the things that happen to the UK. I mean, it's almost prophetic. So not only is it musically interesting, but lyrically, it's really deep and meaningful. This is a great, and look at that cover. Come on. I love that cover. So anyway, some could argue that did suffer from the sophomore slump, but I'm going to say no.
yeah, there you go. It really depends on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
And, we're just kind of looking at it. I'm not trying to define anything, but I think it's fascinating. That's why we're doing this. It's just fascinating. How many records were not successful, or in this case, how many records were successful on their second outing? All right, let's throw it over to Eric. Eric, what's your number 3?
Well, I'm still stuck in the 80s here, guys, but
It's okay.
has been the theme for my other 2 picks. This band was originally called American Express, and I don't think this band gets enough talked about considering how popular they were. But I'm going to go with Picture This
Oh yeah.
by Huey Lewis and the News.
There you go.
Their first record, it was produced by Bill Schnee, who did Pointer Sisters, Rod Stewart. It's not pop rock, had a little bit of new wave to it. It didn't chart, but they were getting a following that these guys were talented. They were fun. Then they decided to produce this themselves. And of course, this was spurned by the big hit, Do You Believe in Love, which was co-written by Mutt Lange. And also, Giving It All to Love was another released as a single. Hope You Love Me Like You Say You Do. Basically, like the first side. Working for a Living was another one. This stepped up the quality. Every song on here is just great. I for a long time, this was my favorite from this band. It's been overtaken by Four, but
Four is surprisingly good. It's kind of a sleeper.
yes.
It sold a lot though.
It did. This peaked at number 13. Again, if it's still on the radio, Do You Believe in Love? I did want to mention that guitar player Chris Hayes, I always thought was underrated. And on the song, The Only One, he has just a barn burner of a solo, guitar solo. And it's probably like their hardest rocking song in their entire catalog. Yeah. But this was great. And then A Sign of Things to Come with Sports, with Four, with the Back to the Future soundtrack, with the songs Back in Time, and of course, The Power of Love. Boy, you couldn't escape these guys in the 80s. And I had to go with this one. This kind of stuck out when I'm like, yes, this was definitely beat the Sophomore Slump.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. And another thing, too, is that it was so successful compared to the first album that there are people that think that Sports is the second album and that's the first album.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I saw them play. I've said that before. It was grad night at Kings Island and Sports hadn't come out yet. So it was in 83. But Huey Lewis and the News were playing everything from Sports. And people didn't know any of those songs. They weren't out yet. But
they're like the ultimate bar band, aren't they?
But man, they were one of the tightest bands I had ever heard in my life.
Yes.
And Huey Lewis as a harmonica player, unbelievable.
Yep.
I really didn't know them. I mean, I kind of knew who they were, but all those sports songs that they were playing that night, I remember they all came, when the album came out, I'm going, oh. But yeah, they were on fire.
They played New Lenox in the south suburbs of Chicago, where I'm at, and maybe 5-6 years ago, something like that, and absolutely brought the place down. They were still just as tight, still amazing,
and
humble.
Oh yeah. But you mentioned what's his name? Oh, brain problem. Chris Hayes.
Yes.
Hayes.
You ever notice on I Want a New Drug where he starts playing Purple Haze in the guitar solo part of it?
There's actually a video out. I think they go from is it Working I can't remember. No, it's I can't name the song, but they bridge right into Boys Are Back in Town. Whole lot of love in right into Boys Back, and it's phenomenal. And I think because I didn't Huey, you guys can correct me or any of the comments correct me. He had some connection with Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy. They knew each other.
Maybe. I know he's in the band Clover, though.
Clover.
Huey's not on My Aim Is True, but the rest of the band is.
Yeah.
Which Clover backed them.
Yeah.
I don't know where Huey
and
was.
Elvis Costello were tight. Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know. Pretty cool. All right. Awesome. Good choice. Paul, what you got?
All right. My last one, I'm going to stick with my Chicago roots, and I'm going to stick with the 90s. 1994 comes out, American Thighs. You got Louise Post, Nina Gordon, Steve Lack, and Jim Shapiro.
Of course.
Had to bring them back for this. Produced and engineered by Brad Wood, American Thighs. You've got your AC/DC influence, you've got your Led Zeppelin influence, but with Nina, she also brought kind of a Tommy Shaw, David Bowie fandom into her influences. So you've got American Thighs, this very raw album, picked up at just the right time. And the three singles were Seether with All Hail Me was the B-side, Number One Blind, and Victrola. Meanwhile, they're getting antsy, so they end up releasing an EP. Told you this was going to be recurring with me. Blow It Out Your Ass, it's Veruca Salt. They knock out 4 very raw songs. And then we get to the very polished, but not too polished, 8 Arms to Hold You. This is a 10 out of 10 album for me. There's no way around it. You got Bob Rock producing it. So what you basically had was you had Rough and Raw becomes Tough and Polished, is how I called it. They played a lot of this material live before the album was released, so they knew what songs worked. They knew what songs clicked. You've got Nina and Louise's vocals. They're intertwined. Even though the writing credits will tell you on the album whose song it is. Is it a Nina song? Is it a Louise song? They are so intertwined that it is their definition sound. So going from American Thighs to 8 Arms to Hold You, and even with the title, obviously, we hear our Beatles influence. American Thighs, we got our AC/DC influence. But just, they made their own thing out of all these influences. It was their sound. They weren't grunge. They weren't necessarily like power pop. It was just their own thing. So a true original came out of this. So we won't talk about junior year. Junior year wasn't too good to them, but as far as beating the sophomore slump, this is a better album than American Thighs, and American Thighs is strong as is. So he told me to keep it brief, but shout out to their Instagram page runner, Kansas City Jen. Thank you for all the extra help and kind of reminding me back to my roots just a little bit. There was a period where I wasn't talking Veruca Salt, but when this subject came up, I'm like, no, they got to be on here. They got
Hey,
it.
Paul, I have a question.
Shoot.
I have a question. Did you open that record?
No.
Is that an original pressing?
Open your
This is
record.
a unicorn. This is a unicorn. I've got an open one. I've got
well
three.
then.
All right, good. All right, never mind.
No, I've got 3 copies. That's my
Okay.
unicorn. That one's not open. That's
All right, now I understand.
yeah. No, I've got 2. No, I've got 1 open copy and 2 unopened, and the unicorn does not get opened.
Paul's like a Star Wars collector. You know, you buy the figures to display and then one to play with.
Well, you got to
Hey,
remember.
you said it, I didn't.
That's Veruca Salt's how I met my late wife. So no, they will always have that hallowed ground of I need to thank. I owe them that much. So
All right, cool. All right, I'm going to go real quick, but thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Good choice. Veruca Salt, for God's sakes. Of course, great record. All right, Tim Derling and I did a ranking of this band not too long ago, and it just immediately popped into my head. I wasn't prepping for it, but I thought, oh my God, this is a perfect example. So anyway, Tim and I, check out the link below. We ranked the albums of Loverboy. Who is talking Loverboy, for God's sakes?
great episode.
Great episode. So we ranked those records. So we're talking the sophomore album, Get Lucky, which by everyone, well,
Every
in our
measure.
ranking now, everybody, reviews, sales, it's the king of them all. And in even our ranking, that's what came up number 1. The first album had Kid Is Hot Tonight, Turn Me Loose, has a lot of great stuff. It went double platinum in the United States. But when Get Lucky came out in 1981, that went quadruple platinum. We got Working for the Weekend, which is an anthem. Whether you're tired of hearing that or not, I can't say. But once you hear that cowbell, you know what it is. At least in our age group, you do. When It's Over is a great song. Jump, Gangs in the Street, Take Me to the Top, which is, I dig it. But it was fun to look at Loverboy and rank them, because some of these records I'd never heard. And some of these records, the later albums, really stand up. So, like I said, we're just trying to turn you on to stuff. So check out that video. But definitely Get Lucky. No sophomore slump in this band. Yeah, they never really achieved that height again, but I don't know how you could. But back in the day, that was everywhere. So I guess we can wrap it up. Anybody else have anything before we wrap it up? Anything you need to say?
The only thing I missed on mine, and I was kicking myself for not saying, is there were 5 singles off 8 Arms to Hold You that all kind of mowed things down. Volcano Girls was the one that everybody knew. Shutterbug that did live on SNL. The Benjamin, The Morning Sad, and Straight. So 5 strong singles. So no filler on that album.
Right. Anything we good? So there we go, gentlemen. Talking about the Sophomore Slump. So here's some records that totally avoided it. Let us know in the comments, what other records avoided the Sophomore Slump? I'd like to hear them. We'd all love to hear it. We'll try to respond to all those. So there's a fun talking music. All right, Paul, Todd, and Eric, I want to thank you guys for coming on tonight. It's a lot of fun. What's next in the canon? I don't know. There's always something. So please like, subscribe. We will see you on the next one.